that went out. It's actually called how can you leverage podcasting to get free publicity? Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about.
James, and really chuffed that we're joined by James Mulvany tonight. And just checking that everybody is okay with the session being recorded. That means that you'll click the little box that came up there. People are just wandering in now. So while that's still happening, James, thank you so much for joining us. It's really great to see you here. So you're an entrepreneur. You've got various different brands, but you mainly have, is it broadcast.co? And you're described as an entrepreneur working in the audio field, helping brands grow their business through podcasting. So would it be okay if you introduce yourselves to people and share what's going to happen in the session tonight?
Yeah, we'll kick things off. I'll get my my slides on the go. Thank you for the brief intro. I'll talk a little bit about my story as well. Some of you here probably won't know that I used to be a student at Huddersfield University. So that's kind of how I can everyone see that there. Can you see my slides?
Yeah, I can see the slides.
Perfect. So yeah, as I mentioned, or as Nicola mentioned before, this is going to be, this really applies to anyone. My businesses are all in the audio space, but podcasting is a medium that's really taken off over the past sort of 5 years. And I'm going to be talking about how you can basically use it as a tool to get free publicity for your business. So this can apply to you if you've already got a product or a service that you've just launched, but also if you're thinking about launching a business and perhaps you're starting to write your business plan or you're putting together plans for how you're going to market and sort of promote and sell your product or service. This is really useful information. And the good thing about this is that word free. I think it's really important when you're starting out that you're kind of as thrifty as possible. And the cool thing about podcasting is it doesn't take a lot to get involved in. And I'm not just talking about starting a podcast either. But basically it can be used to promote anything. So it doesn't matter if your business is tech focused or you're selling, I don't know, clothes or whatever it might be. This can be used from any product or service. So for those of you who have just joined, my name is James Mulvany. My background is in audio. Okay, so I have a holding company called broadcast.co, and we run 4 different platforms or 4 different brands underneath this monkey. So we have radio.co, which is a live streaming platform for radio stations, podcast.co, which is a platform for podcasters, matchmaker.fm, which I'm going to be talking about a lot about today, which is a community that connects podcasters with guests, and also have a production company called Q. All of these businesses basically sprung out of what I started when I was at university. So feels like a long time ago now, probably pushing 15 years. But when I was in Huddersfield, sort of in the mid to late 2000s, obviously the internet was sort of taking off. When I was at uni, things like Facebook launched, the iPhone came out, MySpace was still a thing. And it was really, really exciting to be kind of getting involved in sort of launching online ventures and online business. And I actually took advantage of, I did a 4-year degree, so I had a placement year. And where a lot of people were going out and getting jobs working for other companies, I thought, well, I've already sort of started my business. So I actually technically started even just before university, but I kind of had the foundations, and I thought, well, let's see if I can use the placement year to kind of take it from something that's kind of, I suppose I was earning like what you'd consider like a part-time living. And it was kind of proof of concept to actually something that when I graduated, I didn't need to go out and find a job. And I had kind of developed it to a point where, I didn't need to go and find work elsewhere. And even we could start looking at kind of expanding and hiring a team and sort of building it from there. And that's exactly what I did. So in my placement year, which was back in 2009, I worked very hard. I had a little office in the media centre in Huddersfield, and basically used it to kind of develop a new product, and kind of get the business to a point where I knew I then had the sort of difficult decision, I suppose, of going back to uni to finish my final year, which actually was quite difficult because at that stage, as I say, was probably really at a point where I could kind of go and go at it full time. But I thought, no, I want to go back and finish the degree, because otherwise, what's the point of the first sort of 2 years? So I kind of dragged myself through final year, and then as soon as I graduated, I ended up moving to Manchester about a year later. And that was when I first started hiring. So I've got about 45 staff working for us across the various different businesses now. So that's a little bit about me. This is kind of a chance for you to introduce yourself. So I quite like if some people could say hi, tell me your name. This is where you're watching from. I know you're all watching from Huddersfield. In one sentence, if you can tell me what you can do, and I'd be curious to know specifically if you've got a business, what is it? What industry are you in? Or if you're developing a business, what are your ideas? And also, if you're interested in podcasting, if you've perhaps got your own podcast or you've already been featured on other podcasts, please let me know. So I'll open up the floor. If anyone's brave enough to go first, I'd love to hear what some of you guys are doing. Any takers? Or is this where we get the awkward silence?
I can see a couple of names that I recognise. So I can see Alexander. Would you mind unmuting Alex and doing a bit of an intro? Or Kristin?
Come on, guys, don't be shy.
Hiya. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, how's it going?
We hear you. You sound wonderful.
My idea is still developing. I have a plan for the future. I'm final year photography student at the moment. I'm gonna graduate this year, hopefully. And looking to go to study masters in marketing and brand management. And I'm basically trying to lay kind of the foundations of like a creative agency in the future, like a marketing agency. I would love to like work with creators. I would love to have like my own group of people, friends, just people that love working and creating to create something similar to what I think the company that you have, but that company is more focused on podcasts and creating video content mostly, I think, if I'm correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But what I have in plan is more like to do photography, like events, to have everything basically in one place, to not have to hire many companies, like a photographer separately, videographer, like the catering, the food, the beverages and everything, just everything to be under one roof. You hire one place, okay. and that's everything.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. So kind of like a one-stop shop for events. Is that what you're sort of saying?
Still developing.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Thanks for the introduction. Anyone else who's brave enough to say hello?
Alex explained that his microphone wasn't working, and I've invited people to say hi in the chat, but I recognise Harvey's name. Harvey, do you mind unmuting and saying hi to us and tell James what you're up to?
Please do, yes.
Finding my mic, Harvey says. Okay. While that happens, I'm going to go to another name which I don't recognise, which
Hello,
is
can you hear me?
which.
Oh yeah,
Harvey.
hi there.
Yes.
Hi,
Brilliant.
sorry about that.
It's okay.
How's it going?
Good. Sorry. What do you want me to say?
So just introduce yourself. Tell me your name. I've just put, this is from an old presentation where you're watching from, and just tell us what you do. Well, what are your interests in business, or if you've got any plans, or if you've already launched a company. I just kind of want to get a feel for the room and who's doing what.
Yeah. Well, my name's Harvey, and I am currently trying to make a video game. It's quite annoying, quite a troublesome process, but yeah, that's me.
Okay, thanks a lot. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Harvey.
Cool, okay.
Yeah. Do you want to, should we try one more, James?
Go on then, let's try one more.
Okay, I recognise Emily Aldred's name. Emily, do you want to unmute and say hi?
Hi.
Hello.
What do you want me to say?
So if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what your interests are, and what you're just hoping to get from this session, I guess.
My name's Emily. I'm trying to set up a fashion brand.
Okay.
And I'm quite interested in how a podcast would work. That's why I'm here.
Okay, cool.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Again, I'll get on with the presentation now, and we can sort of take questions at the end. So I'll sort of dive into the bones of this and how I think hopefully it can help you. Hopefully you can get some sort of value from today's talk. So why do the sort of podcaster / guest thing anyway? And I think it's really, really important to remember sort of simple mantra, if you like, which is always be bringing value. So whenever we record a podcast episode, or if we appear on someone else's show as a guest, which is kind of what I'm going to be talking a lot about today, you've got to remember that there's an audience listening, and that audience wants to either be educated or entertained or informed in some way. So as entrepreneurs, as people in business, or even, you know, if you're working in another company and you're trying to kind of market or promote or sell someone else's service, it's always important to remember that the audience aren't there just to kind of be sold to. They want to get some kind of value from that episode. So it's important to start off with kind of like understanding that principle. Like you're not just going on a podcast, or you're not starting your podcast just as a sort of pure sales tool, but you've got to remember that there's got to be some sort of bones behind it. There's some kind of, you know, either some value, some education, some kind of entertainment factor. So that's the first thing. Secondly, podcasting is really good to grow your professional network. I think this is particularly important. You know, if you're a student, you're at university, it's kind of like you're in this little bubble. And one of the things that I was sort of starting to do, I guess, while I was at uni here, especially in Huddersfield, is it's quite a small business community in Huddersfield, is just go out and start having meetings. And back when I was at uni, podcasting was, well, it did exist, but it certainly wasn't as big a medium as it is now. And it certainly wasn't considered such a networking tool. And the thing that I would say about podcasting is, it can allow you to have multiple conversations each month, where the person who's on the other end of the line, the person listening, genuinely wants to learn more about you, and sort of what you do, what services or products you provide. And it's also even easy to meet potential partners and clients and build a network of people that you can call upon in future, and ultimately about creating relationships and connections and growing your brand. So it also allows you to control your media story. This is particularly important if you're starting a business and people look at you as a kind of a thought leader. They go and Google your name. They want to come across information that's kind of positions you as an expert in a particular subject. So let's say, for example, you're developing a fashion brand. Go on fashion podcasts, talk about latest trends, talk about manufacturing, how things are being made ethically, or whatever it is you're an expert on, and share that your knowledge, your expertise in that area. This is really what podcasting is good at. And, you know, ultimately then when people go to Google and they search your name, or they search for your company or your business's name, they'll start seeing media that is talking about you, or people interviewing you on a specific thing, which is really good for SEO. And also there's a thing called the newscaster effect, which is like, if I say something to you right now, you kind of might believe it, but then if you go on Google and find someone else interviewing me about it, so for example, you can go on Google and you can find loads of podcasts of me speaking to other people about how to use podcasting to promote your business, for example, or, you know, what a great medium it is, or how to go and get guest appearances on podcasts. It becomes much more believable because it's ultimately someone interviewing me about that versus me just saying it. ultimately the content is then, amplified. So, you'll be on multiple directories. You could be on Spotify, Apple, etc., etc., etc. It's a really great way of getting your name all over Google very quickly. The other cool thing is podcasts are evergreen content. So when I say evergreen content, it stays there, it's sticky. A lot of the interviews you can see here are actually recorded a couple of years back. But if you go to Google, they're all still there, and we still get clients from them. We still get inquiries, and they're not going anywhere. Podcasts, it's not like one of these fads that's kind of coming and going. There's been a huge rise in popularity in recent years, which means more and more people are listening to them, and also means more people are creating them as well. And if you think about the time that you actually invest to record a podcast, which might be, for example, an hour of your time, and you could do maybe 2 or 3 a month, it's relatively short in comparison to the kind of lasting effect of traction that you get from it. The other thing about podcasting as a medium is it commands people's attention for a very long time, which is really useful. So if you're talking really in detail about whatever it is you do or whatever it is that you're really, really passionate about, the statistic is 70% of people who start listening to a podcast episode will actually listen to a whole episode. People love audio. It can be digested passively, e.g., you don't have to actually be watching. It's not like YouTube where you've got to be paying attention to the screen. You can have it on in the background. You can have it on while you're commuting to work, or you're in the gym, or whatever it might be. And it's a really, really good way of learning things kind of while you're doing other activities. And also as marketers, when do we get the chance to speak to someone at length for, say, half an hour on your topic? If you look at most other online mediums, so for example, advertising, video content, etc., the attention spans are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. If you look at TikTok, it's a prime example of this, where people's attention span is just like literally seconds. Whereas if you get someone interested at the beginning of the episode, then, as I say, the stat is 70% of people will actually listen to the entire episode, which is really good. So make sure you start off strong as well. It's always important. Another sort of side note as well, once you start getting on other people's podcasts, there's a great opportunity for backlinks and SEO, which is basically when your website is being linked to by other websites. So if you're thinking about launching your brand and you want it to come up high on Google, this is a good way of doing that, because you're ultimately getting high-ranking websites linking back to yours. I'm going a bit techie there, I know. So why create your own podcast versus appearing on someone else's? I'm sure there's probably some of you here that really like the idea of starting your own podcast on whatever it is you're interested in, and that's great. We've run many podcasts ourselves over the years, and we also produce lots of podcasts for clients as well on all sorts of different topics in different industries, and they work really well. The thing to remember about starting your own podcast is it can be a big time suck. You have to think about what you're going to be doing, not just for the first episode, but the second, the third, the fourth. And what we recommend to clients is you think about it as a whole season. So plan out your first 8 episodes. Make sure that you've got a clear story or a clear message you want to get across in each episode, or a topic of discussion, and actually plan out in advance. I can't remember the exact statistic, but there's a huge number of podcasts that are out there that only have 1 or 2 episodes, because people think, oh, I've got a great idea for a podcast, I'm going to start it. They go at it, full of enthusiasm. They record 1 episode, they might record a second episode, and then they sort of crash and think, oh, crash and burn. I think, well, this feels like a lot of work, because I'm not getting millions of people tuning in, or I don't quite know exactly what to talk about in the 3rd episode. So think of it as a season, try and plan things out. And there are advantages to begin with appearing on other people's podcasts. I've got a few listed here. So often, if you're starting your own show, you're starting from 0 audience, whereas if you go on someone else's show, they've already got an audience, which is great. They'll interview you on things that you already know about. So in a sense, they're kind of doing a lot of the work. All you have to do is answer their questions and make sure that you come across enthusiastically, and hopefully you kind of know what you're talking about. And certainly if you're kind of launching a business, the chances are you probably know all sorts about certain things that you're really, really passionate about, or what your company or your venture is going to be about anyway. Guest opportunities can easily be switched on and off according to your schedule. As I mentioned earlier, it can be a time suck creating your own podcast. You can often end up sort of, thinking, oh, I've got to create another episode this week, but I haven't got time because I've got other things to do. Whereas if you want to go guesting on other people's shows, you can say, well, I'm going to do 5 guest appearances this month, but next month I'm not going to do any. Also, wider network of opportunity. There's lots and lots of different shows to choose from. Okay, so let's talk about mastering the pitch. And this is specifically about, going out there and finding opportunities to promote your business via being a guest on other people's podcasts and making sure that you get that all important yes. So here's some approaches that suck. Here's not what to do. Just being basic and being like, oh, hi, I want to be on your podcast, or I want you to come on my podcast, without really giving any kind of reason to it. And you would be amazed. I still get loads of messages on LinkedIn with people who just come at me and say, oh, I want to be on your podcast. It's like, okay, well, why? What value are you going to bring to me? Or just being like completely opposite and being like all guns blazing, just being completely salesy about it. I'm just trying to pitch your business, your book, your dog, your cat. I don't want to have any sales pitches. And again, I have people approach me all the time and it just doesn't work. Likewise, I don't necessarily want to know your life story. I don't want to know how you spent a year up a mountain finding yourself. I want you to get to the point. I want to know, if I'm a podcaster, what value are you going to give to my listeners? So here are some approaches that work. Number one, if you're interested in appearing on a podcast, make sure you listen to at least one episode of the show. Again, you'd be amazed at how many people still just will approach podcasts without having any clue what it's actually about. So make sure you at least listen to an episode. If you don't have time to listen to a whole episode, try and skip through it and try and understand a little bit about what it actually contains. Because sometimes the podcaster might just turn around to you and say, well, which episode is your favorite? Or, what can you name something about my show that you really like? So have some sort of understanding of it. Personalize your pitch. Try and avoid kind of copy and paste templates. If you're going to be approaching a podcast, try and personalize it at least a little bit. And actually, I'm going to give you some pitch examples at the end of free downloads. You can go and check some out. Keep it clear and concise. As I said, it's a pitch. It's not your life story. I think the key is here, suggest a few topics that you can discuss on the show and how it relates back to what that podcaster wants or what that podcaster is trying to do as part of their show. So for me, as an entrepreneur, I might go into some examples of how I can talk about marketing, how I can talk about sort of growing online businesses, how I can talk about say kind of self-development and getting that positive mindset. Those are things that I can quite comfortably talk about at length without doing too much research. And again, confidence comes with times. I know for this, a lot of you, this might be kind of sounding quite intimidating to begin with, but to begin with, just try and talk about things that you're really passionate about, that you feel like either your degree is related to or your business is related to. And again, be specific about what shows that you want to appear on. Obviously, if you are, say interested in a specific topic, go out and find shows about that topic. Don't necessarily just approach just general shows, and finally, proofread for typos and mistakes before hitting send. I mean, I've made that mistake before. I've had a typo in an email. So here's kind of like my formula for being a guest on podcasts. Give a bit of a background on this. I set myself a challenge a couple of years ago where I wanted to do during lockdown. So I had loads of time on my hands. I was sat at home all day. We kind of closed the office and I was like, I want to be on 30 podcasts within 30 days. And I actually failed. I was in 48 podcasts in 30 days. Now that is intense. And I did take weekends off. So it was more like over sort of a 6-week period versus a 4-week period. But basically I tried doing 1 or 2 podcast recordings a day. And I did exactly what I just talked about. I kind of I sort of pitched to different shows that I thought I could bring value to based on my experiences as an entrepreneur. I spoke to loads of different people. Some of the shows had lots of listeners and I got, some connections on LinkedIn from it. We got some customers from it. And then other shows probably didn't have very many listeners, but ultimately that's still content that's there. It's good social proof. kind of, as I say, it's that newscaster effect that will be there forever. Those interviews of me, you can go out and Google my name, you'll be able to find them. But anyway, so I kind of devised this formula, and you know, I thought, okay, well, let's start off with, you know, what can I talk about? So mine was, as I say, marketing, business entrepreneurship, and personal development. And for each one of these things, I would write, say, 5 to 10 bullet points of topics of conversations that I thought might be interested in. And I'd be kind of comfortable talking about, say, 20 to 30 minutes. Sometimes these shows are a little bit longer. Generally, things don't exceed an hour. I think the sweet spot's about 30 minutes for most podcasts. Some will be 45. But as I say, it very rarely goes over an hour. And sometimes, you know, a podcaster might have other aspects of their show as well. So be prepared to answer questions. Sometimes like icebreaker type stuff. It could just be a bit about you. It might be like, what do you like doing in your spare time? And quite often when you start engaging with a podcast or speaking to the host of the show, they'll normally brief you on questions they're going to ask anyway. So, for example, some of the things that I would talk about when I was doing my sort of 30 podcasts and 30-day challenge would be podcast growth, building communities, bootstrapping software as a service companies, using audio to market your business, etc., etc. And so these were all things that I sort of bulleted down. And then I would say, start approaching podcasts that were specifically focused on marketing. And I'd say, would you be interested? You've got a marketing podcast. I know you've talked a lot about, say, Facebook ads. You've talked a lot about content creation or SEO. Would you be interested in doing an episode about how you can use podcasting for marketing? And at that stage, this was sort of one of these things where not a lot of marketing shows were talking about podcasts. They would be like, yeah, I'd love to have you on my show. That's exactly the sort of content that I think would be valuable to my audience. So that's really, really good way of getting a foot in the door when you start approaching podcasters. I guess this probably doesn't apply to you guys as much. This is more if you've already got a podcast and you're looking for guests. This is a presentation I've given quite a few times before. So I'll kind of brush over this quite quickly. But if you've got a podcast and you're looking for really good guests on your show, and the benefit of doing this is it helps grow your podcast. So, you know, if you get a guest who's perhaps, say, a business leader or, you know, they're an expert on a specific topic, quite often they'll have a decent following on, say, LinkedIn. They might have lots of Twitter followers. They might have a big mailing list. And often when you interview them on your podcast, they'll then say, hey, listen to this podcast episode I just recorded. So it's a really good way of actually growing your podcast. So let's say I've got a podcast about marketing. And as I mentioned, I want to plan the season ahead. I'll sketch out, say, 6 or 8 episodes, and they'll complement each other. And then what I want to do is I want to find one guest who's really good to talk about a specific topic on each episode. And my podcast about marketing, I might say go out and find a guest who's, you know, a really good expert on Google pay-per-click. I might find someone else who knows really, who can write really good copy. You give some tips on how to write copy, you know, for your website or for your emails, etc. I might find someone who knows exactly how you can grow and explode an Instagram account. I might find someone else who's, you know, really has a lot of knowledge about Facebook ads or email marketing, etc. And basically research experts that you think are going to bring value to your show, and sort of check them out, make sure that they're actually genuine. You want to kind of avoid getting sort of fake gurus, that sort of stuff. Okay, just to finish up, a couple of free resources, and then I'll sort of take some questions, or we can open up some discussion about this. This is a course I put together called Guest Academy, but we've actually got some downloadable pitch templates. As I say, you can customize these, you can tweak these, and these are really good for going out and finding opportunities for you to speak about whatever it is you're passionate about on podcasts. You can get them at guest.academy/pitches. I'll send these slides across after this, so you can click on the links. This is a website that we run, and this is exactly for what I've just been talking about. It basically connects podcasters and guests. You can sign up to it. It's free to join. You can research shows that are relevant to whatever it is that you're doing, and people can also find you as well. So, you know, if you say that you're an expert in, you know, say marketing or computer games development or fashion or whatever it might be, you can list yourself as an expert on here, and podcasters can reach out to you too. This is a little bit more specific. but we've also just released a state of audio report on broadcast.co. That link looks horrible there, but this kind of has an overview of how audio is at the moment. Lots of useful statistics and information if you're interested in going after that sort of thing. And then finally, sort of handing it over to you. I know we've kind of sort of brushed over this pretty quickly, but if you're interested in using podcasting as a tool to sort of promote and grow your business, start thinking of your pitch. What value can you deliver to podcasts that would encourage them to either invite them on your show, or when you approach them, you can actually say, well, look, here's the things that I can be talking about, which might be really interesting to your audience, and also start sort of breaking down what it is into categories. So if you go onto Apple, you'll see that podcasts is obviously, or Spotify, are also split by category. So start looking at those categories and thinking which ones would be applicable to what it is about and your business. And then finally, if you're interested in connecting with me after this, probably best way is to connect with me on LinkedIn. If you go on my website, jamesm.com/connect, there's a link on there. So that's the presentation. Be quite good now to sort of open up for a bit of discussion.
Thank you so much for that, James. That was well, there was so much in there, and really so interesting. So I do encourage people to post any questions or comments in the chat. And while we might be waiting for those to come through, James, do you mind if I kick off with some questions?
Absolutely, good idea.
Because I've definitely got some. And yeah. So just imagine I'm completely inspired about starting a podcast now, but I'm not a very techie person. So that's kind of where my questions are going to be around. So one word I want to come back to, you mentioned something about when I'm planning my season. So for a beginner, what would a podcast season look like? What kind of, how many episodes should they be thinking about? What, if you've never done a podcast before and you're completely new to it, what's realistic to start with?
I think aiming for sort of 6 to 8 episodes is good. Some podcasts are longer, some maybe like 12, 24 episodes. But I think a lot of people, when they start, they think of a podcast as just this linear thing. Like, I've got to release one episode every week all year long. And if you commit to that, it's a lot of work and you'll burn out very quickly, especially if you're new to it, because recording the podcast is kind of the easy bit. It's all the stuff that goes alongside it. So it's the editing and then actually promoting it and spending time then pushing out content on your social media channels to promote that episode, taking out the quotes, the best bits. That's the stuff that then can take a lot of time. Whereas if you think about, let's just say, committing to say 6 or 8 episodes, that's more manageable. I think you can plan your sort of time around it, and also then you've got a realistic end goal, versus just saying, well, I'm just going to record one episode every week or every other week, or even just one a month. Because after a period of time, you'll face kind of like pod burn, as they call it, which is basically where you're just burnt out from recording so much stuff. So being really realistic, having a schedule and thinking, okay, well, I can even record those 6 or 8 episodes in advance before I even release that first one. So I can almost have that content created and sit there, or I can maybe work 2 or 3 episodes ahead. So I'm not, sort of panicking, thinking, oh, I've set myself a goal to record a podcast this week and I haven't got any ideas. But if you can kind of map it out, even if it's just a top line subject for each episode, as the example I gave earlier, if I was creating a podcast about marketing, well, I might record an episode about, how to blow up a TikTok channel, which is obviously, also one of the trends at the moment. Or I might talk about, how I can use AI to create blog posts, or whatever's kind of on trend at the moment. I might think about that. I don't know about fashion, but I know one of the people on the call earlier mentioned that they were interested in fashion. So it might be, looking at different aspects of the fashion industry that are interesting, and just having a sort of clear topic for each episode.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so I've got a question coming from Emily, and Kristen's got a hand up. So Emily has asked about tech. So what software can you edit podcasts on?
There's loads of software out there. one of the free ones is called Audacity, and that works on Mac and Windows. There's also a great piece of software called Descript, which makes it really, really easy to. So it basically turns, when you record your podcast, it actually turns it into a text. So you can almost edit it a bit like a Word document. So if you're not particularly tech savvy and you don't, because actually editing audio, is a skill, you have to learn it. But actually Descript, as I say, it will turn everything into sort of like a Word doc, almost like it transcribes it into text. So you can, if you wanted to delete a paragraph, you just select the text you want to delete and it will take it out, which is really cool. Again, just go out there and search Google the best podcast editing software. There's tons of stuff out there, but those are a couple of things that I'd recommend is Audacity or Descript.
That's great. Thank you so much. Okay, Kristin, do you want to unmute yourself? And
Yep.
That's great. Thank you.
I have actually 2 questions, if that's all right.
Of course.
One of them is for a beginner, for example, that is just excited to either just try it or just start doing a podcast. The 2 questions that I have is, first of all, what kind of platform is maybe, I wouldn't say like easier to use, but like better for people to just start on?
Sorry. So can you repeat that? So which
platform?
About platforms, yes.
I mean, in terms of where you upload your podcast, there are lots of platforms out there. YouTube have just released a podcasting feature, which is pretty good. You can check out our platform, which is podcast.co, which is super easy to use and very, very kind of user friendly as well. Spotify also have something which allows you to submit your podcast, etc.
So nothing too specific, like just basically choose whatever we prefer. Is not like a better one
think,
or.
I think a lot of people get caught up. Creating a podcast is not actually as difficult as you imagine. I mean, ultimately, everyone's got a microphone built into their MacBook these days. So, if you want to sound better, you can go out and buy like a USB microphone, something like that. But I think the main thing to think about when you're starting is what the content of the show is. It's a competitive space now, which makes it quite difficult to get cut through. So that's kind of, I'd say, more important than the kind of getting too caught up on the tech stuff. And again, it's just like a lot of things. It's just starting. You can reiterate and improve over time. I think probably most people, when they first start their podcast, aren't as good as when they sort of start getting momentum and traction, and they'll probably listen back to their first episode and think, oh, that was not really very good at all. But just starting is the most important thing. Like with a lot of things, like with the business, for example, as well.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much. We've got a comment coming from Kit. Kit, I don't know if you want to unmute and share what you're thinking about Audacity versus Tenacity, or if you want to read that, James, and kind of make a comment about.
I've not actually heard of Tenacity, so perhaps you can tell. It sounds interesting. I do know about there was some privacy issues, worries, concerns with Audacity. So yeah, please feel free to enlighten me.
Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Brilliant. So my internet is kind of on off, so if I cut out. Anyway, so Tenacity, it's the exact same code as Audacity, so it works the exact same. But there was a massive controversy a while ago where they changed their license agreements so that they can take the recordings that that you produce and then harvest them for data and then use them for, I believe, tailored ads, which is kind of alarming. Tenacity, I believe it functions the exact same. It's just that because the code is open source, they've taken out all of the stuff that generally is very privacy infringing, I guess. So
interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have a look at that. Thanks, Kit.
Yeah, no worries.
That's great. Thank you so much for that comment, Kit. Are there any other, James, are there any other tips that you would give beginner podcasters?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what, as I mentioned in the presentation, maybe like just try and be a guest on someone else's podcast to begin with, because it's not actually that difficult. You know, as long as you get your pitch right and you find the relevant match for what your area of passion or expertise is, you know, even find someone else who's just started a podcast and they're sort of looking to get experience interviewing people. That's a really good way of kind of getting confident behind the mic, getting a little bit of confidence sort of presenting, and kind of getting a feel for it without committing to starting your own show. As I say, you can kind of you can use it as a tool to promote your business as well, which is fantastic. You know, if you kind of decide you like it and you think, you know, it's weird because some people still get caught up in the sort of, they don't like the sound of their own voice and all this sort of stuff, or they feel like they don't know what to say. So, you know, if you mess up to begin with, doesn't matter, you know, because you can get better over time, you can reiterate, and you know, it's something that some people really catch the bug and they absolutely love it, and other people decide, well, maybe it's not for them. But just try it, and just try and, you know, even if you record an episode just on the, you know, you've got an idea, doesn't even have to see the light of day, you know, just have a go at recording something, put it together, and get a feel for it. I mean, that would be my advice to anyone who's sort of thinking of starting, getting interested in podcasting. Share it with your friends, you know.
Yeah, that's brilliant, James. And can I just come back to the what you were talking about in terms of editing? So how long would that take? Let's say there was you were aiming for a 20 or 30-minute podcast. Would people have been talking for an hour? And if people have been talking for an hour, how long does that take to edit? Is there any kind of rough formula that you as a skilled person think, oh, we've been doing 40 minutes now, which creates X amount of hours for me after the show?
It's a good question. I think generally, from my experience, if you talk for 45 minutes, you probably end up cutting out 15. You know, if you talk, I think if you talk for, some people don't edit at all. Some people, you know, like you'll have a conversation, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. They might top and tail it with like a little intro and an outro. And again, it's good to record those after your conversation, because you can kind of summarize what's coming up, or you know, you can record a little outro just kind of with some key points to take away. But you know, it really depends, you know, whereas some episodes, you know, people will talk for like a couple of hours, and obviously then you don't want if your podcast, try and be relatively consistent, I would say, with your episode lengths. If you're thinking about launching a show, you know, you can deviate a little bit. Doesn't mean every single episode has to be on the nose at 30 minutes. Some might be 28, some might be 35, but try and sort of keep them relatively consistent. But if you end up having a conversation with a guest for 2 hours, you'll probably find that a lot of it's not actually that interesting, or some of it might be kind of be filler or a bit waffle. So you might just want to take out the best bits and try and truncate that down so it kind of matches in with your format. But you know, equally as well, normally if I go onto a podcast as a guest, that the podcaster will say, by the way, we'll aim to speak for this long. And as I say, more than often they'll give me something to get, not always, but normally more than often, if I'm going, you know, onto a podcast as a guest, they'll give me some information about how the show will progress. So they might say, well, we'll do 5-10 minutes at the beginning of sort of icebreaker questions, or you know, I might ask a bit about your entrepreneurial background and your journey so far, and then we'll talk for say 20 minutes on you know, whatever it is you're supposed to be talking about. So normally, you know, that's kind of agreed in advance. Sometimes they'll send you a whole list of questions as well, which is really useful, because obviously you can prepare answers, or you can at least get bullet points. Again, you know, that's a good little tip, is especially when you're first starting out, have stuff written down in front of you. So if you're kind of thinking, and again, you know, I'm lucky because I've done this so much now. I generally don't need a script, or I don't really have any bullet points. And if people kind of catch me out, I'm quite good at kind of taking questions. But it can help. And you know, admittedly, like when I first started doing this, I would always have some bullet points and some kind of go-to answers that if I got stuck, or if I started, you know, have that moment where you kind of your mind goes blank, you've got something written down in front of you to refer to, which is always useful.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. And are there any, you know, beginner mistakes or annoying things that happen on podcasts that people should avoid when they're starting out?
Yeah, I think just not having clear direction. Like, don't. I think podcasts have evolved. So gone are the days where podcasts are sort of two friends sat down the pub having a laugh, or recording it in the garage or something like that. So audiences expect stuff to be kind of concise and have some value from the show. So I think if you could sort of take it seriously and plan it out and think, okay, like, let's try and have some kind of format that we're going to stick to. What are we going to be talking about in this episode? What value do we want the audience to get from this show? And this is kind of what we go through with our clients when we're producing podcasts for other businesses as well. Just sort of turning up and sitting and talking random stuff for an hour was kind of the trend maybe 10 years ago, but now people want something that's kind of concise and specific. So yeah, just try and have a bit of a plan before you get stuck into things.
That's great. Well, you've been absolutely fantastic, James. I'm just going to give people a few seconds. I have asked if there's any other questions and they haven't come through, and you've been so comprehensive. But are there any last questions? You've certainly convinced me that I want to certainly appear as a guest. Sorry, James,
yeah.
go on.
If anyone else has any questions or they think of anything afterwards, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to help.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. So we're finished now, James. So
okay.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time and your expertise. That was a really, really interesting session and very much appreciated. So thank you for joining us. And
pleasure.
To everybody else, see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Great to speak to you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.